This is the Best or Worst Podcast. And now, here are your hosts, Koji Stephen Sakai and M. Martin Mapoma.
Welcome. This is episode number 68. I am Koji, and as if you were listening to the last episode, my co-host Martin is not joining us for this episode, unfortunately. He is having some family issues going on right now. So as I said in the last episode, please keep him in your thoughts and send us some good wishes because he definitely needs some good wishes. All right. On Tuesday, we talked to Morley about his life, and we got to know him as an actor and as a police officer, and found out a little bit about. We talked a little bit about being Asian or being a person of color in the film industry, in the entertainment industry. And today, we're going to ask him about his best or worst moments. So Morley, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to ask you your best or worst moment. But before I ask it to you, just one thing to keep in mind is when I ask people about their best or worst moment, we try to say, don't choose when you had your children or when you met your wife, because those are easy moments. And obviously those are going to be your best or worst moments, or a death of a family member, right? Unless it's something really, really fantastic that happened. That's something totally different. Otherwise, reach a little bit and, you could tell us there. So let me think, what do I want to hear? Martin always chooses to hear the best in people because I think with all the crazy shit that's happening right now, especially in this episode, I think this episode's going to come out after the election, so we might need to hear some good stuff depending on what happens on Tuesday, hopefully. But so with that being said, and because of I'm thinking about Martin, I'd love to hear your best moment from your life. So Marley, what's your best moment?
So I would definitely say not the birth of my children, because that's just, that's so weird. That moment, those are horrible moments.
Oh, they're scary moments. They're scary moments.
Yeah.
Because for the guy, it's always like, what I tell my friends is that as a guy, the moment they come out is when it becomes real. For the woman, it's like 9 months, and it doesn't really that much. I mean, it does because we have to, we have to care for our wives or be, nice to our wives. But once it comes out, it's like, oh my God, it's like,
right.
We have to do shit now. Sorry.
Well, no, isn't that the crazy thing too? They come out and they're like a wet eggplant with eyes, and you're like, and when people are like, oh, so beautiful, I'm like, what? That's bullshit. Like, what? No, it's not. You look at it and you're like, are you sure it's done? I don't know. And it's making weird noises.
Although I'll have to say though that there's something biologically that makes us think they're really cute for family, like the father and mother. But I always think when I see other kids, I'm like, wait, they look kind of alien-like still. Yeah. But I remember thinking oh, my kid is so beautiful, and then I'm like, oh, it's just something biological is going on right now, making me think he's like an alien.
100%. When Facebook sends me remember this memory or whatever, and my daughter just turned 2. And to what you're saying, I remember at the time, oh, it's so beautiful. Yeah, she was also a preemie. So she had when she came out, her face was still a little squished and not formed yet because she was so premature. But after when she was ready to be taken home, I remember thinking oh, so cute and beautiful. Have you ever seen something so beautiful? And then now 2 years later, looking at those pictures, what the fuck was that? What? That's what? Oh my gosh! So now I'm worried that I'm at 2, I'm oh, she's so cute and beautiful, and I would do she's got me wrapped around her pinky. I'll do whatever she wants. Yeah. And then I'm well, is it still those hormones? Is she butt ugly and no one's telling me? Who would who's going to tell you you're doting on your 2-year-old?
She's in her prime cuteness in terms of children. I think 2 to 7 is kind of that. After that, the mouth starts getting more talky and
my God.
It gets a little bit less. They get less and less cute.
Yeah, I know I'm in for something for a long day when my son's so Dad, and then he starts saying oh, deep breath moment. Here we go, nonstop talking for 10 minutes, But yeah, I think you're right. Once they get past 7. Then things start growing at the wrong rates. Their arms grow too fast, and so they go through the awkward moments, and it's tough on them.
They start getting attitude and start thinking they know more than you. And
right.
I mean, the joke with me was that my mom was from Japan, And so like she didn't speak English super well. She didn't know American history and culture. So like when I told her I knew more than her about what's going on, like I did in terms of like
Right.
history, but not as like a human being, but as history.
Right.
My son, if he tells me I don't know shit, I'm like, dude, like a master's degree. I went to school here for like, like 20 years of my life. I know everything.
Right.
No, I don't know. I know a lot. I know more than you.
Right. Right.
But whatever.
I may not know as much about Minecraft as you do.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
right,
God,
like
I hate Minecraft.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No dad. Yeah, if I have to hear about an end or anything or a wither again,
Oh, dude.
you
We
know,
listened to we
but
listened to Audible audiobook of like, and it was like the worst thing I had ever heard in my life. It like made me want to like die. It was terrible. Sorry.
taking a Minecraft book.
Yeah, it was a Minecraft book. It was like a story about Minecraft, and there's like,
Was
zombies.
it Three Friends? Was it Three
Uh,
Friends and they had to, one turns into or was it a guy and a girl, right? Was that it?
yeah,
They get
yeah,
sucked into the,
yeah.
I
I
went through
mean, I couldn't listen to it. It's just I tuned it out. I like that. I had to like think about other stuff in my life to make me get through those moments. But
that. The sacrifices we make as parents.
well,
Yeah.
what's your best moment then?
I think so. And some of this will be, I think we discussed a little bit before, but I think in order to get to I have to put it in context to get to the best part, right? And so when I was at the police department, we had multiple associations for like non-white associations, right? We had like the Latinx Association, African American Police Association, like all these associations, and they compete with the union, not because like you have to belong to the union because they're your collective bargaining unit, right? But you can also you can form associations with the permission of the chief, and usually they function as reaching out to the community, but also as a safe kind of association for other like officers, right? And so we had kind of a spattering of these BIPOC associations. And because I'm mixed, my idea was, why won't we collect together and combine as one BIPOC association? And at that time it was just persons of color, right? But why won't we, for more political power and more, collateral, why won't we just combine and we all have the same ideals. We want to be treated equally, not more or special or extra, just equal. And so in doing so, I upset a lot of people. And the police department I belonged to was, at the time I was there trying to form that association, was about 98%.
Okay.
And so, and also I should back up, there was no Native American Association and no Asian American Police Association, but there were Native American cops and Asian cops. Not a lot, but enough where they were being treated unfairly, right? So I tried to form this association and I ended up getting death threats from other cops. So I would get things mailed to my interoffice mail, to my mailbox, that, from another either a precinct or another division or whatever, and I got a bunch. And so after a while, I got one that was like consistently like, it was like, fuck you and die, fuck off and die, a lot of dying. And then somebody mailed me a fired round. So it was a bullet taped in a piece of tape attached to a note. And so at that point, I was like, okay, this has been going on for months. I should probably turn it over to internal affairs, right? So I turned it into internal affairs. They put it through, they sent all the material to the lab. They got a hit on the notes. They got a hit on the bullet. They got a hit on the tape around the bullet. Fingerprints belong to a supervisor, an ex-supervisor of mine. And he was a supervisor like a year or so prior to that. And so internal affairs interrogates him and they have him on tape. And they say, any reason why we would have found your fingerprints on this death threat? He said, yeah, I must have written it. Right. And then they asked him, have you ever seen this bullet before? And he said, yeah, it's the same rounds that I have at my house. If you went to my house right now, it's a rare or ammo. I have a bunch, and then you'd find the gun that shoots them too. And so the next day I was fired. And then, and for a bunch of reasons. One, I was stupid enough to try and to unite the associations against the union.
Yeah.
So the union wasn't going to defend me, right? And two, because the union's not going to defend me, it allowed the chief to say, I'm really tough on cops, right? I'm tough on corrupt cops. Yeah. So they fired me. I hired an attorney. And then the first hearing we had was for discovery. So we wanted the reports, the forensic reports, we wanted all the files and everything else. And I just remember the attorney representing the city and the police department, came in and looked at me, and I think he called me a skunk, and he called me something else. It was very insulting, like I was some scumbag, right? And the first thing he says was, well, we have an issue, Your Honor. All the evidence at the property warehouse has gone missing. And on top of it, Internal Affairs accidentally deleted all the drives or all the files relating to this case, and they accidentally shredded all the hard copies. And so we'd ask that we continue without any evidence. And the judge was like, case dismissed, right? So I obviously got my job back, but the rest of my time at the department was just horrible because I pretty much outed myself. It was obvious that anybody could do whatever they wanted to me without any repercussions, right? Yeah. And so forming the association never happened, and then going to work and getting looks from not just other officers, but people that were lower ranked than I, just giving me a look like, like, who are you? And in a paramilitary organization, it's tough to begin with, but as someone as a lower rank looking down on you, that wears on you. So needless to say, it wasn't fun being there, but I think a couple things happened, and that kind of being in that low point where my identity, because I couldn't be an actor, which I wanted to be a cop to affect the change that I wanted to see, right? Yeah. Well, then that was in danger. And being a cop is not just a job. It's I don't know. I don't want to say it's too cliche to call it a calling, but it's something that you take on internally, and it's a part of who you are because you're dealing with humanity at its best and its worst. Yeah. It's a very interesting job. So, and it's typical rules don't apply to you because you live in this, weird world where not only are you upholding the law and taking an oath to do that, but you've been granted the power to seize property and life from other citizens, right? Like, you've been given that discretion. If you feel it appropriate, and according to lethal force laws and the Fourth Amendment, you can seize someone's life. And so, that's all a huge dynamic. So that being under threat, and then the fact that going to work was no longer, not necessarily, it didn't feel safe, because if somebody wanted to kill me, I'd be dead. Like, in the real world, if someone's going to kill you, you're not going to see it coming. They're just going to kill you, especially someone who's a cop, right? Yeah. So that wasn't really, maybe there's a little bit of worrying about that, but mostly it was just the complete pure rejection, right? Which wasn't really there to begin with. Like, you had to be 10 times better in this department to be seen as about, this much less, right? So going to work was tough. I reframed the way I thought about things, and I appreciated smaller things, things that were really important. Reprioritized what was important to me. So family, certain elements of work, so that when something good came along, it felt like I could appreciate it more, even though it was something tiny. And so I think best moment isn't something that it's like, here's this one specific moment where it was like, this is nothing will ever be greater than this. I think it's a kind of a escalation or an evolution of moments. So that when I met my wife, I thought, wow, not only is it fantastic I met somebody that I really connect with, but she really likes me as well, right? And then that at that moment in time was probably the best. But then it evolved into a relationship, which I thought, well, this is the best. And then there was a day where I was running and I just, in my head, I'm like, this is the woman I'm going to marry, and that would have been the best. But then on top of everything else that happened, on our honeymoon, I get an email saying, would you come and consult technical advice on this studio film, this $40 million film that we're shooting in Toronto. Would you come up and do that? It was just like, not only am I not going to get spit on, but here's something that everyone is like, it's totally cool and fantastic. And then getting immersed into this environment where coming from the real world where you're dealing with the smell of, piss and vomit and dead people and dead babies and dead everything and fighting and, and then also dealing with cops that hate you, your fellow cops that hate you, to like just total fantasy, but everyone working for a common cause efficiently. It was just like, this has to be, nothing could ever top this in my life, right? But then getting another job, and then from that job, another job, and then being able to say like, well, I don't need to be a cop anymore. I can do this, and actually full circle that, now I can act, which was my original dream in the first place. So maybe that was the best. And then getting my first acting gig on a independent feature, like it was like a $2.5 million feature, but getting to do that with like 3 or 4 A-list actors, was like, okay, and now I made it, right? But then, and then getting another gig after that. But, so thinking like, oh, this is not going to get greater than this. And I have a fantastic family. And, but then COVID hits, right? And so because of that framework still carrying on, even though there's a lot of horrible things, and we're in a tough spot in our country, and there's been far too many deaths, right? And a night like this, there's a moment where my wife and I were standing in the kitchen watching our 7-year-old and 2-year-old eat, and just, our dogs sitting below them, hoping they drop something, and watching the way their mouths chew, like their little mouths, how they chew things. And I just turned to my wife and I said, is there any greater moment than right now? And I guess that's kind of my point. After after going through a lot of difficult stuff and truly appreciating what you feel to you is valuable and precious, there's a set of moments where, like tonight, watching my kids chew their food with their little mouths and their little cheeks, that's a snapshot that I'll take and try and burn into my memory, so that when I'm dying, that's what I'm going to call up, are the final images of my life. And I think that's what makes you who you are, are those key moments in your life, right? And there's probably only 10 of them, but that being the latest one, I think it's not just the greatest moment, it's the collection of the greatest moments who make you who you are.
Well, and I think the moment, everything you went through in the department, I think probably helped you appreciate everything that happened after, because of all the tough things that happened during that thing, right?
Right. Exactly.
So I love that. I was trying to figure out where you're going with it, because I kept thinking, well, this doesn't sound like a very good moment.
Right. Yeah. Did he hear best moment? Because I'm not quite sure.
Well, and this is totally on the side of what you're talking about, but I do want to mention, if people listen to this show before, I've always been pretty tough on cops. I've never loved cops in general, but my thing has always been that it's about truth. And my thing with police officers is that if their partner does something illegal and they're not willing to like speak out about it, and instead they try to hide it because it's their partner. And I understand like friends and brotherhood, but they're also police officers, and that's their job, is to do the right thing, not to be in a gang, but they're doing the right thing.
Well,
And my experience has always been that they're not willing to, and not all of them. I can't say all of them, obviously, but
right.
like a lot of them, their default is these are my brothers, and I'm not
Hmm.
I would never rat on I'd never rat on these people. And to me, it's like, well, then, it's hard for me to trust when you're not going for truth and justice. If you're going for truth and justice, then
Right.
awesome. Which also
Right.
means that you turn on, even if it's your mother that's committing a
Yep.
crime, you should be you should be high enough to be like, she committed a crime, I'm gonna arrest her. I'm not gonna cover it up.
Right.
I'm not, or my friends or whoever it is, which is really
Yep.
disappoints me about the people that you're dealing with, because they committed a crime and they should
Yep.
be, they should be held accountable for that crime, regardless of who they are or what you've done,
Yeah.
or who you are,
Right.
and
Yeah.
that always drives me nuts. And so anyway,
Yeah.
sorry.
That's just not reality. Like, I think, there's a philosophical argument to law enforcement in America, and that's there's the spirit of the law and the letter of the law.
Yeah.
And we give officers the discretion to choose between the two. And so, like, you're talking about your mother, getting your mother a traffic ticket is often an example used in classrooms. Like, would you be willing? Are you the cop that does not allow your mother to speed? Like, you catch her speeding, pull her over. Are you going to give your mom a ticket, or some nice old lady, or whatever? Or are you going to let them go with the warning? And I think, there's definitely been situations where I think you have to look at the totality of circumstances
Sure.
and say, is this something that I really want to spend taxpayer dollars on? Is there a lesson I can teach, especially with kids? I'm talking mostly with kids, right?
Yeah.
Like, you don't need, I think, and then the other side to that too is that a lot of BIPOC kids are obviously treated horribly.
Yeah.
Much worse
Mhm.
than white kids. And so that's where, if you're during the spirit of the law, you have to make absolutely sure that it's uniform, right? Like, Giuliani is known for his ComStat program that he did in New York, right? It's like, look, statistically, these felons that commit horrible crimes and assaults, they have a rap sheet as long as you're armed. So what we need to do is focus on taking people down for small misdemeanor crimes. Well, the problem with that is, if you're arresting people for jaywalking, guess what? 99% of the people that get arrested for jaywalking are people of color, right? So there's an inherent bias to begin with. And so you can't say statistically it's okay if you use the spirit of law, because philosophically that doesn't work. That doesn't pan out in the real world. And so, to your point, yeah, like, if anyone should know better, it's a cop.
Yeah.
And so I think the hard part for me was that up until, fortunately and unfortunately, up until George Floyd was murdered, right, I would have never told that story. Like, I would have, I think that there's been people in my life that have known me when I was a cop, or have found out through other people that I had gone through that, and prior to George Floyd being murdered, would still side with the default was cops are do nothing wrong, right? So if something like that happened to me, there must be something to it, right? Whereas, unfortunately, someone died, George Floyd died, but after that, now all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, like, you went through that, like, they're willing to listen now, especially like white people are willing to listen, which is interesting to me, right? Like, the second they find out that I was, not only am I a person of color, but I went through something at the department that horrible, all of a sudden it's like, hey, can we throw you on this job? Can we throw you on this job? Can we qualify our job with, can we qualify our series with you, right? So it's like, sure, I'll take the work, but I'm still going to be honest with you. So, I think it's, hopefully your best moments are the ones that are worth being recalled when you're dying.
I love that. I love that idea. I love that. I love that you're thinking about, watching your your kids eat in that moment. Cause I have a similar moment, but mine was like, one of the moments was we were I think it was like, we were in Honolulu at a hotel, and him and I were swimming, and we're the only people in the pool. And it's like like 7 o'clock, and there's like a sunset, and just it was a really awesome moment. And it was a stupid moment. 'Cause it's, like they're like, I'm sure we did more awesome things on our vacation than be in a pool at 6 o'clock. But just I remember like looking at him and being like, this is an awesome experience. And then, like I remember I even wrote, I secretly write, well, I guess not secretly because he could listen to this later. But I actually write him letters, and I keep all our pictures by month and year, and I write letters in some of these folders that are hidden. Like talk about things that we did together. But
that's awesome.
But yeah, I love that. I love this idea that, that there are these kind of snapshots, because I do think like if I would never write an autobiography, but if I ever did, like the way I would want to write it is like, what are like the 10 moments that I want to remember when I die, and that like will tell a story, instead of being like, I was born on this day and all these things. Like it's like, no, what is like those moments that really, like when I think back, are like good or for bad, right? That really like defined, and when I look back, what are those moments that I'll think about? But that was a really, really powerful moment. This is one of my most. I mean, a lot of the bad moments are about cancer or being sick, and a lot of the good moments are like all over the place. So good moments are really, really different, and yours was really unique. So I really love that. So thank you for coming on the show. And
thanks for having me.
And I had you on 2 episodes, so thank you for the marathon. I appreciate that. And thank you everyone for listening. For this episode, we'd love to have you guys tell a friend about the show. Text them about the show, let them know about it, and then make sure that they download the show, because that's really, really helpful. So thank you guys, Morley. Thank you everybody for listening, and peace out. Bye.